Hi, my name is Dale Adams of Planning Ahead of Time, and on this week's Pat Chat, I'm speaking with Clare. Now, Clare and I met recently at Business Buzz Networking in Warwick, and we've also seen each other online at various different events. So, Clare, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Dale. Thank you for having me here today. Absolutely. My name's Clare Spiers. I work with people that are grieving, and when we think about grief in all its forms, so it can be bereavement, which is where we naturally go, but also could be anticipatory grief, loss of health, end of relationships. So, anything in our life where there is a significant loss tends, or even a significant change tends to result in us grieving. And what I do is work with people to help build their grief literacy and really help them appreciate what healthy grief looks like and begin their recovery.
Okay. Well, I know from this work that most of us have come into it through something that's happened to us so that we can try and help others through our own experiences. May I ask, where did your journey start?
Yeah, lovely. How did I end up here? So nearly 5 years ago now, my stepbrother died from COVID far too young. I was made redundant and I had the end of a relationship. So I went looking for something. I'm sure you can imagine, I was in deep grief. I really wanted to find something that would help me move forward. I didn't want traditional counselling. Having done traditional counselling before, for me, and it is very much horses for courses. For me, I found myself talking and talking, but I found it quite re-traumatizing. So I wanted something that was more of a structured way of moving forward. So I found something called the grief recovery method. It's an evidence-based program where you work through all of those parts of what does grief look like? What did I learn as to how to grieve? Because we're taught how to acquire things, but not what to do when we lose things in life. And it starts to go deeper and you really start to look at your own grief. And when we think about grief, as I mentioned at the beginning, of not just being bereavement, we can start to understand our own grieving behaviors and our own relationship with it. So when I did a piece of work during this program where we do our loss history, we look at the loss throughout our lives. One thing I particularly recognized was that my childhood was loss after loss after loss, including the death of my stepfather by suicide, which in the 1980s, for those of us that are old enough to remember, you didn't talk about suicide. There was a lot of shame around it, and you didn't talk about grief either. So it was a lot of absorbing what was going on around me. And this program helped me, one, resolve a lot of that loss. And I tried many, many times to process it. And so I found much more at peace with that. And it really helped me learn my own relationship with grief when I look back at my life, because I think we don't have often, or many of us don't have, an awareness of when we're grieving if it's not bereavement. Yeah, and seeing how it can play out in other people, can play out in ourselves. So really building that literacy, that emotional intelligence around grief is really helpful as well. So when I did the program for myself, I thought, this is just incredible. I felt so much more empowered. There is no magic wand. You can, however, feel peace and relief as a result of working through your grief. So I, at that point, thought, this is my purpose. I need to do this with other people. And I've been doing it ever since. And it's incredibly rewarding.
Yeah. It's interesting the words you've just used about we're taught how to get things, but not how to release them and lose them, because there is an element of release required when you lose something. But it's a bit like we're taught how to live, but not how to die.
Yeah.
And you're saying then about suicide, the elements of shame around it and not speaking about it. We didn't ever really get taught about to speak about loss, to
Mm-hmm.
grief, suicide, death.
Yeah.
It's just also unspoken. And
Yeah.
therefore, it just lives more in our bodies. We just
Yeah.
take it all in, I think. And then
Yeah.
it gets trapped, it gets stuck. And
Yeah.
it's how do we enable ourselves and allow ourselves to let go, to release, and actually walk forward with some peace?
Absolutely. And grow around our loss. There's, if we think about grief as love, it's never going to go. Yeah, you're not going to suddenly go, okay, I don't love that person anymore because they're not here, or I'm not going to, yeah, I'm not going to have a relationship with that thing and that part of my life anymore. But the idea is that we can integrate it and be at peace with it so that we can move forward. It does become part of who we are. And that's a big part of my work, is helping people acknowledge that this is a new reality and that's okay. Yeah. And let's build what that new reality looks like. How do you begin to be the person that carries this grief with you? There's avoiding it, burying it, trying to ignore it, all of those kinds of things. You're doing yourself an injustice by doing those things, because it is part of your story, no matter how painful it is to look at.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And you've spoken a little, or you've mentioned anticipatory grief, which I feel is so underestimated, really. Again, I think it's swept away, often because people are in the thick of what's going on around them. And they don't necessarily realize or appreciate the grief that their body is holding.
Yeah.
What would you say about that?
So I think it's really relevant to what you're talking about as well. And, you know, this whole podcast of planning ahead of time, because anticipatory grief is when we start to agree to grieve, knowing that a loss is coming. So often if somebody has been given a diagnosis, they've fallen ill, and people are often caring for that person or the situation that is coming, and grief begins at that stage. And often people don't acknowledge it. And the best thing people can do for themselves at that stage is start to familiarize themselves with how to grieve healthily, and being able to talk. That it's important people don't isolate themselves. The first step in all of it is acknowledge you're grieving. Yeah. And it's completely natural and normal to have anticipatory loss when you know, anticipatory grief when you know a loss is coming. And it's really important to find people that you can talk to about that. Start to understand, what does healthy grief look like? How can I help myself build some of the language around grief? Because studies have shown, and this is really important when we're talking about planning ahead of time, that those with high grief symptoms, in a study by Frontiers in Public Health, so those with high grief symptoms are more at risk of dying within 10 years if they do not have the awareness, the capability, the appreciation of how to grieve. Yeah, so it's really important, if you're facing a loss, actually to equip yourself as soon as possible.
Well, I'm a firm believer, and I study a lot around how our emotions create our physical illnesses.
Yeah.
And I work with the chakra system, and, you know, to me, frequencies, energies, obviously with the work that I do, and I educate other people in, it's so relevant that if we don't allow our bodies to feel and experience, actually it will manifest in physical illness. So I wasn't aware of what you've just said with that study, but, you know, to die within 10 years if they're not actually grieving in a I was about to say in a positive way, and it must be very hard maybe for people who are listening to hear it as saying grieving in a positive way, but it is actually trying to learn, as you say, how to grieve in a way that's healthy.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of unhealthy ways to grieve.
Yeah, absolutely. And avoidance pushes it into the body. What we do want is to find tools and techniques to help us release it. And crying is one of them, but there is also the ability to verbalize. There is the getting out in nature, moving your body, getting the emotions moving around. And it is not, because particularly if you've had a significant loss, sometimes this whole experience of grief can be really alien to you.
It can be really alien.
Yeah, can be really alien to you. So it's very important to learn different ways that can help you process the loss, because it's different approaches work for different people depending on what they connect with. The important part is not to push it away and to avoid it, because that's where it manifests in the body and can become illness. Or we start to we call them short-term energy releasing behaviors, but you can start to indulge things that don't help you, such as alcohol, might be drugs, but it could be gaming, TV, shopping, things that just give you a short hit of pleasure, whereas actually sitting with and feeling those emotions, no matter how uncomfortable it is.
I do feel that we are now in a culture where feeling and allowing is constantly overridden through distraction.
Yes.
Whether it's people sitting on phones, TV, radio, there's so much going on around us that we can allow ourselves to absorb into that, as you say, with alcohol, etc., rather than allowing the feelings through. And I know they talk about mindfulness an awful lot now, but I do think there really is something to be said about even how painful they are, allowing some of that to come through, but finding a safe way to express that anger or frustration, or to allow those tears out.
Yeah, absolutely. Finding a safe space, which is why people like me exist. Create that safe space for people to sit in that discomfort and it be completely okay. I think we're probably all guilty of, this is an uncomfortable situation. I'll look at my phone, or we'll go and do something else. And there's a piece around thinking on balance, these things are okay. Part of building grief literacy is about recognizing when you're avoiding and being able to recognize that actually you're grieving and going, oh, hold on a minute, there's something going on here. What am I grieving? What's changed? There's something that's, because we don't always recognize it, and allowing yourself to sit with it, let the emotions come. And all of my work is confidential. A client once said to me, which I just thought was a lovely explanation of it, is that sitting with the discomfort, what happens is you allow it, you feel it, and it floats through you and just dissipates. And I just thought that's such a wonderful way of describing it. We have created a society where discomfort is not allowed, yet it's completely part of the human experience. So it's really important that we allow it to move through us, then it does lift.
Do you think if people don't allow it to move through them, this is where there are outbursts of whether it's rage or hysteria, etc., that suddenly come from nowhere, and then they don't even necessarily associate it with the grief they're going through? Well, it's that person made me angry, but somebody else may not have got angry. It's actually a way of their emotions trying to surface. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think there's a few things in that, actually. So grief can often feel like fear.
It can feel what, sorry?
Feel like fear.
Yeah.
So there can often be a sense of sort of really holding a lot of fear in your body, or what grief feels like that. So it's very easy to have an outburst then. I think grief affects our tolerance to things that we consider to be unimportant. Because it's changed your perspective. Something now is very big, very serious for you. So the trivial can be really frustrating. And also repressing emotions, it's going to come out in some way. So that can very easily come out in rage. And ultimately depression, and isolation and all of those kinds of things.
Interesting, your words there about changing perception. I think grief and knowing that whether a grief is coming, so the anticipatory side of it, or actually once you've gone through a loss, whether it was quick and tragic or whether it was long standing, either way, your perception of life changes completely.
Absolutely.
Perception of who you are because of what you've gone through, that changes too. I think it has a massive impact.
Huge. And often where there's a significant loss, there is a lot of secondary losses as well. So it might not just be, let's pick a different loss. So say the end of a relationship as an example, not just end of life. The secondary losses are the friendship groups that you have, the routines that you used to have, the things you used to do together. So there is a whole sense of you're losing so much of your life then. So ultimately a huge part of your identity and what shaped you up until that point. So as you do grieve, part of that process and experience is about now identifying who do you want to be in the future. And you are given that grace to allow you to shape that going forward.
Yeah. And so from it as such, if you are able to work with somebody like yourself and go through that grief recovery, it will enable you an opportunity as such to reinvent yourself slightly. And as you say, determine who are you now, and what do you want from your life now. As you say, with yourself, for example, that was to help other people through what you'd gone through.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and for me, very similarly, but mine was again anticipatory. I started looking at planning ahead of time. Well, we had my mom here, but she was going through a dementia journey, and therefore as we went through that, I realized that there was so much that people didn't know, and how could I help them with, if you like, dying, death, loss and grief? What could I do to educate people around it through what I was learning? So we then come out different people, and we can try and move forward with that. But you do need support, because often friends and family and people, they're not actually the ones who can help you through it enough, are they?
Yeah, and I'm sure you've heard this too, but I hear it time and time again that people are there initially. Yeah, regardless, there's lots of people there and they're supportive, but they go back to their lives. Understandably, they've got responsibilities and things that they need to focus on. So then there can be a real sense of loneliness and isolation, and that's where specialists that can help really signpost, help you find your tribe. You've changed, things are different, and finding a new group of people that get it, that understand, that want to move forward with you is a really important part of your experience and moving forward. I think part of the reason, and very much your purpose and reason for doing what you do and sits with mine, is that we very much recognize that, hold on a minute, there isn't enough out there helping people appreciate what are extremely difficult parts of life that we will all go through, that everybody will experience, and saying, actually, I'm going to put myself into that space so that people, if they want to get that level of support, that help and access, to make it more available for them so that they're not feeling quite so isolated.
And I think here, obviously a lot of this conversation and conversations around grief are very much about the loss, the grief, the hurt, the pain. But there is this transformation that can come where people decide to do something about it, help other people. As you say, we never forget, we never stop the love. It's always there. It's just we carry it in a different way moving forward. But I do think that, again, sometimes friends and family don't always understand that, because we all grieve differently. And it can be quite nice to speak and have that support of somebody who isn't judging you for the fact that you want to move forward. And you maybe don't want to be on your own for years or sit in that grief for years because it's an expectation of other people around you. You actually want to move forward and you want to handle your grief differently. Absolutely. What do you think to that?
Yeah, I think there are absolutely people reach a stage of saying, actually, I don't want my life to stop.
Yes.
Yeah, at this point. So there's a point in time where people are tired of carrying the pain, that they tend to seek me for help. That could be immediately, it could be anticipatory, in advance, and it could be months or years later. There's a really clear point in time. And it's a really important part of moving forward. Some people are very comfortable sitting in the pain, and that's okay, because it keeps them close to the person. However, it does obviously inhibit the long-term quality of life. People that want to move forward are saying, I have a life beyond this as well. And this is where finding a community can be really important, which is something that I'm building at the moment, of people that have had a significant loss, that want to meet other people that are in a similar situation, to be able to say, I'm ready, I want to move forward, I want to learn about my experience now, but I also want to be around other people that get it as well, and share that experience with them and learn from each other, because again, it's about reducing that isolation.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for talking about the work that you do and some of your own experiences and what you've gone through to get where you are today. If anybody would like to contact you, find out more, how do they do that?
So you will find me on all the usual social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. If you just look at Clare Spiers Grief, you'll find me. My website is peopleboost.co.uk, and you can see all of my services on there as well, because I've got different offers depending on where somebody is on their grief experience.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Claire, for joining me today for a Pat Chat. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dale. It's been great.